right, let's go ahead and get started. I'm sure that we will still have some people joining us. Kind of go over some of the guidelines as we start first, before we get into the content. If you all could please mute your microphones during the training, that would be really helpful for me in terms of not getting distracted. And I'm sure for other participants in the training who would like to hear the material. So if you could just mute your microphones. We have a great example why that's important. If you guys could please
give me 1 second. I gotta sign into this training.
Right. Do that. All right, so yeah, if we could, there may be times that I ask for feedback that you might be able to come off mute. And at that point, please come off mute, but then once we're finished with that portion, just go ahead and place your microphones back on mute. I will for sure offer an opportunity for questions at the very end of the presentation. So if you do have questions and I don't take a break during the portion that you are having a question about, please just enter it in the chat. And Laura, who is assisting today, as she has the last couple of days, can get my attention to make sure that I can acknowledge questions if there's a good kind of break for that. There won't be any formal breaks where you can go and grab a snack or use the bathroom planned during the training, just because we want to keep things moving and make sure that we're able to get through all the material. But if you do need to, please just take a quick break on your own, but just be sure to come back to us. If you do need to step aside and take a break, please make sure that you turn your camera off. That would also help preventing distractions to other people. And as much as possible, I know that we all have a lot of responsibilities and tasks, but if you could eliminate multitasking as much as possible, you will get the most out of the training. As we get started today, if you could make sure that you enter your first and last name in the chat box, along with your agency name and your email address. We'll use this information to make sure that you can get a certificate of completion. So I think we are ready to get started. All right, I'm gonna just move this over. Okay. All right, so the typical approach that a lot of agencies take when it comes to recruitment and retention is to recruitment and retention planning, which is what we are discussing today, is to repeat the same activities and events from one year to the next. We understand that AFPRR planning can be time consuming, and it can be a challenge to coordinate with a lot of people with limited amounts of time. So it is often easier to use information that has been approved in previous years, but I want to know what you found to be the most difficult parts of the AFPRR process, because I know this isn't always the time that everybody looks forward to, but it is so crucial when it comes to developing good plans, being able to execute good plans for recruiting and retaining foster parents. So actually, as we get started today, go ahead and if you have any thoughts about what the most difficult parts of the process are, go ahead and take yourself off mute and you can kind of just mention that right now.
I think for me, one of the hardest parts is one, having to collect data and numbers before, ahead of time, before the fiscal year is even over, so we don't even really have a full picture. And also the pre-planning. I mean, a lot of times, when we're looking at training topics prior to the end of the fiscal year for like the next year, it's hard because then we have our topics nailed down when, things kind of come up as they go. And so it makes it hard to commit to that plan.
Okay, so one of the things that we certainly suggest during the process, and I understand that because, trying to gather a lot of data in that short period of time and documenting it, especially when you're talking about collecting not just for your agency, can be difficult, but we actually recommend that you kind of already do this throughout the year, that you are documenting information about inquiries and outcomes. And so when it comes time to pull this information together, you really already have it at your fingertips. But what you are sharing is a very, it's common feedback that we receive. Thank you for sharing that. Are there any other thoughts about what's difficult about the process? All right, well, let's go ahead and continue. And we will have the opportunity to kind of address some other common issues or concerns, and hopefully I can answer questions that you all have that might simplify the process for you and make things easier. All right, so the true purpose of developing an annual recruitment and retention plan is to assess the effectiveness of our strategies and to eliminate and replace ones that don't lead to the outcomes we expect. So while you might be developing your plans at the beginning of the year, this is something that we'll talk about as we continue, but it really is meant to be a living document. So as some circumstances may change, or you are learning more about outcomes, say you have the same type of activity planned several months of the year, and you learn by the second time that you've done a certain recruitment event or activity that it's not as beneficial as you'd like. Just because you have it in the plan doesn't mean that you should continue to do that. It's a living document, so you are able to change certain things as you need to if you find that there are different activities or events that would be more beneficial in meeting the outcomes that you are hoping for. So during the recruitment portion of this training, we talked about the importance of gathering data to assist with developing goals for our agencies and our counties. And while data generates a lot of numbers, our achievement or the lack of achievement of our annual goals is much bigger than just reaching a number or hitting a benchmark. The bottom line is really about the children that we're giving care and responsibility for, and whether we have the homes available to meet their needs. For us to maximize use of these plans, we have to keep this in mind. It's about the kids and not just about the numbers. So we hope that this training is going to increase your understanding, your development and implementation of the AFPRR plans so that you can use the plans to your benefit. And the planning process has been completed. AFPRR plans shouldn't just be tucked away until it's time to do this all over again next year. Rather, they should be a work plan for you to utilize throughout the year. What's really unique about recruitment and retention work is that it provides wonderful opportunities for you to make people feel respected and valued, and to plan activities and events that can create happiness and show appreciation and support for families that do so much for our agencies and our children. We hope that you also find it rewarding to be able to use your creativity and talents to take advantage of those opportunities. So much of the AFPRR planning process is task-oriented, but the reasons that we complete these tasks are rooted in our values in child welfare to strengthen and support families and children. Before we start digging deep into the process, I want you to think for a moment about the things that make you feel valued. Many of us feel valued when others listen to our points of view, when they acknowledge our contributions and the ways that we've shown growth and improvement, when they take time to assist us in ways that help us to be more successful, or even something simple as hearing thank you. The things that we need to feel valued are the very things that we should make sure that we're keeping in mind during the AFPR planning process. All of our planning is about determining the ways that we can prepare foster parents to care for children we serve and to provide ongoing support that demonstrates how much we value them. Doing this is the only way that we're going to be able to increase and sustain homes and to meet the needs of children in foster care. During the last couple of years, we've been forced by the pandemic to be creative in the ways that we express our appreciation for foster parents without gathering for picnics and for holiday parties. And now that health threats posed by the pandemic have lessened, I want to encourage you all to continue being creative and figuring out how to address concerns and meet the needs that foster parents have. Keep in mind the basics though, returning phone calls when families have questions or when they need help when they're caring for children, checking in with them when they have a challenging placement, before they call you, and any of the seemingly small things that you can do to show gratitude and respect for foster parents that you work with. And remember that your agency's foster parents are constantly making judgments about whether they're going to continue providing care for children and whether they'll continue working with your agency. Every single contact we have with them gives more information to use to make those decisions. So it's important to consider how we're interacting with our foster parents and the impact of those contacts. Your foster parents are ambassadors for your agency. They're going to be your agency's best and biggest advocates in the community, or on the other hand, they may be the loudest naysayers about why others shouldn't, others who might be thinking about becoming a foster parent, why they shouldn't work with your agency, why they should just steer clear of either working with your agency or even foster parenting altogether. All right, so let's spend some time talking about the documents that will assist us with putting this year's recruitment and retention plans into action. There are, quite a few things that are similar, but we definitely have a few changes this year. So please try to make sure that you are tuning in to things that have changed about the process this year. AFPRR planning is very much a data-driven process where we use information about our current progress and outcomes to help shape our planning and practices for future things that we will do. Before any information is ever requested from child welfare agencies, the Out-of-Home Services Bureau requests from the Data Management Unit detailed social demographic data about children in care by county and by placement. And then we compare that information against information about how and where children are placed to determine new goals for licensing and maintaining new foster homes during the next fiscal year. So now we'll take a look at each of the documents involved in the planning process, including those that you see on the screen, the assumptions worksheet, foster home estimator, and the 878 forms that are used to document county and agency plans. So you might notice that list of documents did not include the infamous viable bed spreadsheet. For those who may not be familiar, the viable bed spreadsheet, with that spreadsheet, it listed all of the unrelated homes that are licensed with your agency, along with a long series of questions that had to be answered about each family to determine viability. There was a host of variables to consider, including whether the family had been on hold, how long an existing hold might last, et cetera, et cetera. And some of the responses that were provided on the spreadsheet required explanations. So we started looking for a more objective way to determine viability of foster homes. And determining viability is about looking at the homes that are willing, able, and likely to accept a placement when our counties need and agencies when our counties and our agencies have different placement needs. So we decided to look at foster home usage within the last year. So the way that we did this is that we determined that foster homes that were licensed for a year or more are considered to be viable if they had a placement at any time during the last year. This change allows for a more standard and objective way to determine viability, instead of different agencies having different ways of judging whether a home is viable or not, and having to consider all of the questions that were answered on the spreadsheet. So the benefit to agencies is that you will have one less task that you'll have to complete during the AFPRR planning process. This foster home usage information has been provided to us by the Data Management Unit, and it's going to be entered on your county's foster home estimator in the exact place that previously showed the viability percentage. So I hope that is something that makes you all happy, excited. All right, and if you're wondering how this change might impact your licensing goals, comparing this year's statewide viability shows that there should be little to no impact on your county's overall goals when you compare this year's viability with kind of the percentages from the last few years. As you see on the screen, during the AFPRR planning period, over the last couple years, our viability ranged between 12% and 29% for unrelated licensed foster homes. And this year's statewide percentage is 15.6% of homes that are not considered viable, and that's the statewide average. So that percentage is really at that lower end of the range that we've seen over the past few years. So the new first step in the AFPRR planning process is going to be completing the assumptions worksheet. This is not a change from the past, and actually the assumptions worksheet has remained the same as it did last year. It's an Excel spreadsheet that's used to estimate or project the percentage of children in different types of placements during the next fiscal year. And those assumptions should help us determine our need for new foster homes. MDHHS supervisors are responsible for filling this out, but input from partner agencies should be considered in determining county placement percentages and placement projections for fiscal year 23. That's going to be the best way to find out the overall trends in your county and to make proper assumptions about placement. For those who were a part of the AFPRR planning process last year, as I mentioned, you're not going to see any changes to this estimator. To this assumptions worksheet. As you can see from the example, the statewide percentages and the current county percentages will already come to you filled out when the spreadsheet is sent, and it'll show you how your county's current placement percentages for children who are in relative care, who are in residential care, and who are in treatment foster homes, how your county's percentages compare to the statewide averages. So after collaborating with other partner agencies in your county, the assumptions column, that middle column, should be completed. You'll notice that there's red text on the screen, and that text shows the maximum percentages that can be used for placement in residential settings. Those numbers might fluctuate yearly based on negotiations with the monitors. For the last few years, that hasn't changed. We have remained at a 5% maximum for children under 12 that are placed in residential care, and a maximum of 20% for children over 12 placed in residential care. So when making your county assumptions for residential placement, you can't exceed those maximum percentages. For example, I think what you see on the screen is 27% of children ages 12 and over are currently placed in residential. However, as we talked about, the maximum percentage should not exceed 20%. So during your collaborative meetings with partner agencies and groups in your county, some of the discussion really should be about developing strategies to reduce residential placement usage for children over 12. If you do choose a percentage that's higher than the maximum and send that in, it will be changed when it's returned back to you. So please make sure that you are adhering to those maximums for residential placement. The percentages that you plug in are going to reduce the overall licensing goals for your county. For example, if you assume that your county is going to be placing 40% of your children in relative care, that means that 40% less children will have need for licensed foster homes because they are placed in other settings or a different setting. The percentages chosen do need to be realistic though, when compared to your county's current percentage. I mean, if your county's current percentage for relative care is 30%, choosing, saying that you're gonna place 50% of the children in relative care may not be very realistic, especially if you don't have a plan for achieving that. And do note that when it comes to the 878, the AFPRR planning form, your county will have to describe in detail what the plan is for achieving the assumed percentages. So now let's take a look at the second page of the assumptions worksheet. The first question here and the last question on that first page If your county is having particular difficulty with placing children under 12, children between the ages of 13 and 17, and also if you're having difficulty placing siblings. If your county is having particular difficulty in these areas, you can choose to identify a certain percentage of extra homes. If there's someone whose computer is beeping quite a bit, I don't think I have ADHD most of the time, but sometimes I do. And it would be very, very helpful if you could mute yourself. Thank you. If your county is having a lot of difficulty in these areas and you do choose to identify a certain percentage of extra homes that may be needed for any of those three populations, children under 12, 13, or children 13 to 17 and sibling groups, and you do add this additional percentage, what you're saying is that in addition to your county's goals that will be determined by the estimator, that you're going to need to add to your goal that extra percentage of homes that you believe is needed to reduce difficulty placing children. So be aware that any extra percentage that's identified is going to get figured into the calculation for the estimated number of homes that your county is going to need. And this is going to increase your county's goal for the target population that you've identified, and it may actually include your overall county's goal for the total number of homes needed. So when you are thinking about whether to add that additional percentage for those different populations, just be aware of how that will affect you. We'll talk a little bit later about the choice factor, but I will mention that here, that a part of the calculation for licensed foster homes automatically will include a choice factor, which will slightly increase the number of homes that may be calculated to really account for trying to find the best fit of homes for children. And so just know that some of those kind of factors are already accounted for. And if you do choose to add an additional percentage, just be mindful that adding a really high percentage is going to have a significant impact on your overall goal. So I don't want to discourage you from adding that, but just be aware of the impact that it'll have. All right, the goal of the chart at the bottom of the page here, data on recruitment and licensing processes, where you're going to document the number of inquiries received in your county and the number of families that move through each stage of the licensing process. This information from your county's MDHHS agency, it should come from both MDHHS and the private agencies that are working with you through developing this plan. Those should be combined and documented here. The reporting timeframe should be from October until June. It is a partial year, but so when the calculations are entered for figuring out the number of homes that may be needed during each stage of the licensing process, it will extrapolate based on these partial year numbers. So it's just kind of based on your current progress. That information is not something that's going to increase your goal. It just provides more information to you about how many homes you really need to reach out to and start with in terms of inquiry. How many of those homes do you really need to complete an orientation and complete trainings in order to reach your eventual county's goal? All right, so when it comes to the 878, you're really just going to take this information on this data on recruitment and licensing and transfer it over to the AFPRR form. Once this information is added to the foster home estimator, the estimator is going to do all the work for you in figuring out the number of homes that your county is going to need during each stage of the licensing process. During the recruitment training, we talked about the importance of tracking data, and this is one area that doing that tracking data really provides beneficial information for your county. Once this assumptions worksheet is filled out, completed, MDHHS supervisors should be sending this back to the BSC analyst that sent it to them. And you'll see this information that you provide here in the foster home estimator. All right. The information that each county provides on the assumptions worksheet is combined with the information that we receive from the data management unit. And all of that goes into producing the foster home estimator. MDHHS supervisors are going to receive this spreadsheet from their BSC analyst. The spreadsheet is going to be already completed when it's received, and it's going to include 4 pages of data. When the MDHHS county office receives it, there's nothing left that needs to be filled out on this document. This is all going to be for your information. The first page will show, excuse me, much of the information that your county provided on the assumptions worksheet, the worksheet that we just talked about. The highlighted area here shows some additional information. First, there's a question about the average number of beds in a home. That's a statewide average that's figured by adding the capacity of all unrelated foster homes throughout the state, and then dividing this number by the total number of foster homes to come up with the average. And this number is going to vary from year to year based on the changing average. And this year's average is going to be used to help determine the number of foster homes that will be needed during the next fiscal year. So the next question in this highlighted area is about our choice factors, what I just mentioned before. And specifically, the question asks, what percentage of beds should be empty so that you can have a choice of best placement for each child? And the answer shows 20%. That is something that will be consistent across counties. Each county won't have a different choice factor. That's a statewide percentage that will be listed. What this means is that for every 100 children in care, we want to have 120 beds to choose from so that we can make every attempt to place children in homes that are the best fit for them, not just in any available placement. Another question in this area addresses the number of foster home closures for the county, and it's based on fiscal year 21 data, since that's the last complete year that we have data for. The assumption is that the county will continue to close homes at about the same rate. In determining the number of foster homes that we need for the next fiscal year, the number of closures have to be taken into consideration because those are now homes that are no longer available to place children. The last question in the highlighted area asks about the percentage of homes in the county that are not viable. The percentage that is shown is going to come from the foster home usage data that we just discussed a few minutes ago. The viability percentage is included in that calculation that determines the number of homes that the county needs during the next fiscal year. A county's viability percentage is based on all unrelated foster homes located in the county, regardless of the location of the agency that's holding the license. And so where your county may actually end up, when it comes to viability, we may be including homes that are not licensed by your agency, but if they are physically located in your county, they'll be counted in that number that determines viability. And of course, that crossover kind of happens throughout different counties across the state. I know the common question is, well, how is that right if other agency, if we're not getting credit for all of our homes? Typically, the majority of homes that are licensed within their home county, but because it is a common thing for there to be at least a few homes that are licensed by an agency in a different county, it really just kind of balances out. All right, next page of the estimator. Information about the percentages of foster homes that completed the different stages of the licensing process that you completed on the second page of the assumptions worksheet. Those numbers are going to show up here on top of page 2 of the estimator. This page is also going to show demographic information about children in care from your county. It'll break down licensed foster homes in the county by type, noting the total number as well as the number of licensed relative homes, treatment foster homes, and tribal homes. Our example, as you see on the screen here, shows that Michigan County has 66 licensed foster homes. 21 of the licensed homes are relative homes. And currently the county does not have any treatment foster homes or tribal foster homes. Given the challenge that we are currently facing with placing siblings, we have added additional information to this page, showing data about the number of sibling groups in the county by size. So this is not something that existed in the past, but what we're showing here is the number of sibling groups of 2 or more in the county, the number of sibling groups of 3 or more in the county, and the number of sibling groups of 4 or more that are in the county. And this also shows the percentage of those sibling groups that are placed together. This information can provide an even greater understanding of the county's needs as it relates to sibling groups, and really allow for more focused, targeted recruitment of homes for sibling groups, because now you have more information about kind of what's typical in your county in terms of sibling group size. All right, and so I have highlighted here just so you see the area that I was talking about in case you have not already identified that on your own. All right, page 3 of the estimator shows the number of children in care at the time that the data was pulled, because we know that sometimes that number changes pretty frequently. So all of our data pull obviously was done on a particular day, so that the information that you see is for the day that it was pulled, and it's information that is going to be consistent across county in terms of the day of the data pull. It shows the number of children that are in care when the data was pulled, where these children were placed, and how the number of children in care compares to children in care at the beginning and end of both fiscal years 20 and fiscal years 21, the last 2 complete years that we have data for. The portion of page 3, that is magnified here, excuse me, shows the number of currently licensed foster homes and the number of children placed in those homes by age range. To figure out the number of homes that the county is going to need in fiscal year 23, factors such as the county's current number of homes, the percentage of homes that are not viable, and the number of foster homes that are expected to close are all taken into consideration. And you can see where all the information is coming from in the highlighted area on the screen. All right, page 3 of the estimator also shows your county's overall goal for children ages 0 to 12, and the goal for youth ages 13 and 17 on line 25A. If you did choose any difficulty of placement factors on the assumptions worksheet, your final goal, which shows on 25A, is going to be higher than it normally would be if you had not chosen that difficulty of placement factor, because it accounts for the additional foster homes that need to be licensed to meet the needs of children in the county. So the goal for sibling homes can be found at the bottom of the page. This year, you're going to find that additional information that we're now including about homes needed for sibling groups of 3 or more and sibling groups of 4 or more. You'll find that on this page. This information that your county can use in planning your targeted recruitment events. Line 38, the number of foster homes needed for sibling groups of 2 or more is actually the number that you're going to be using when documenting the estimated goal for sibling homes on the AFPRR form. And so that additional information is just really for your knowledge and use. It's not something that is going to change your goal for sibling homes at all. All right, so you can't have a target group goal so for children who are 0 to 12 or 13 to 17 or sibling groups. So those are the target groups. You can't have a target group goal that's going to be higher than the overall goal for your county. So if any of the goals for children, homes for children ages 0 to 12, homes for teens, or homes for sibling groups, if any of those goals are higher than your total goal, then the estimated total goal has to be increased at least to that number to cover the number of homes that are needed for those target population groups. If you look on the example that is showing on the screen, we see that Michigan County's overall goal for fiscal year 23 is to license 14 homes. We see that by looking at line 25A. It also shows that the goal for children or youth ages 0 to 12 is 3. The goal for teens is 11. And then we have to look at the bottom of the page to find the goal for sibling homes, which is 7. And we see that on line 38. These foster home estimator goals should be transferred to the AFPRR form on the foster home estimator goal line of the chart that shows the individual agency contributions toward meeting the county's goal. All right, I know that is a mouthful, so I do want to pause for any questions that may have come up at this point.
We don't have any questions in the chat, Monica.
Okay, thank you, Laura.
Yep.
All right, so as we continue, I definitely want to remind you all that the goals that are indicated on the foster home estimator are not based on what may or may not be seen as achievable for a county. The goals are based on data that's analyzed to identify the number of homes that are needed, for children, and obviously the hope is always to provide the best fit for a child and not just an available home. We operate on the firm belief that no children should be placed in a more restrictive environment because we didn't have enough licensed foster homes and because county's goals were considered to be unachievable. I know sometimes the goals are very challenging, but those goals are only dictated by the number of children that we have in care and how well we're really able to place them and to meet the needs that they have. All right, so this is showing what you will see on the final page of the foster home estimator. And this shows that information that I was talking to you about, that additional information that you will receive once you have documented the ways that foster parents or inquirers have moved through the licensing process. And so, this just tells you based on your current outcomes, these are the numbers you're going to need moving forward in order to meet that overall total goal that's indicated by the foster home estimator. And so this should really just kind of help you when it comes to your outreach and being able to know how many homes that you need to target and have working with your agency to help you meet that overall goal. Our example here of Michigan County shows that the number of foster homes that we're going to need at each stage of the progress if we continue to trend in these areas the same way that we did during the last fiscal year. All right, let's move on and talk about the dashboard. We'll talk about the ways that the dashboard can be used by your agencies during the AFPRR planning process. I am going to switch screens here so I can give you a live view of the dashboard. All right, and so for those who may not be familiar with the dashboard, or maybe you are and just kind of want to know how to use it better, this is the tool that we use to track our progress toward our statewide licensing goals every month. But it not only shows our statewide goals, but we're able to see how well we're progressing with meeting our goals by BSC. We can also narrow it down to even just looking at the progress of MDHHS alone or private agencies alone. We can look and see how our counties are also performing specifically, with specific information outside of those other views. We can even look by agency if we really want to just select one particular agency to see how we're doing. As you see on the top of the screen, there's 4 different speedometers showing the different goals that we have, the first being those overall goals. And then we have our progress in our teen foster home goal, progress toward our goal of licensing homes for children with disabilities, and then the percentage achieved foster homes licensed for children, for sibling groups. So as you all see right now, this is not information that you will have because this is data that was just released to us. This is the May dashboard, so it will be coming out probably in the next couple of weeks. It just has to go through the approval process before we're able to release it. But I do want to present the most current information so that you all see kind of how we are progressing as a state right now. As you see, our overall goal is 965. We have licensed 538 homes so far. We are falling significantly below where we expect to be for 14 homes and sibling homes, but we have surpassed our goal for homes with disabilities. This next area here on the screen where my cursor is just shows the percentage of the year that has passed by. And so this kind of offers a pretty good benchmark. It is not exact when it comes to our interim goals, but it kind of gives us an idea of how we should be pacing ourselves. So you see that we've completed 67% of the year. Ideally, we want to be about at 67% achievement in reaching our different goals. As you see, if you look at this first speedometer, we are somewhere between 55% for our total goal. So we're below that 67%. For teen homes, we are right about 30%. For homes with disabilities, we have reached that 100% benchmark and surpassed it. And then for sibling homes, we're right about 55% or so. And so you can kind of use this percentage of the fiscal year completed to kind of guide your expectations in terms of where we should be in terms of licensure. As I mentioned earlier, we can choose to take a view of this information by BSC. You would just click the button and it shows you where we are progress-wide for your BSC. If you just want to look at MDHHS, you would choose that. But because I have not gone back to the statewide view, when I just hit MDHHS, it's only showing me progress for MDHHS homes in BSC 2. If we want a statewide view of how MDHHS is doing, we would go back to statewide and then hit MDHHS. And again, you can also look by county. You'll notice that some of these other fields have disappeared when you begin to narrow the focus. So if you are wanting an agency perspective, go back to statewide first and then select your agency, or you can also select a specific county from here. Let's take a look at the bottom of the screen. This first chart here shows how we have progressed every month this fiscal year. The blue line or purple, not exactly sure what color that is, it shows how many homes that we have opened from month to month. So as you see, we've averaged between opening 51 homes a month, and at the highest, I believe we're at 79 homes. Last year, we were averaging pretty close to 100 homes a month. And so, this certainly indicates that we are having some challenges in this area. The red line shows the number of homes that we're closing every month. And that average has ranged between 110 and 149 homes per month that have closed. So we are certainly outpacing our open homes with the number of closed homes. So far this year, we've opened 538 homes and closed 961. All right, as we continue going down the screen, the chart on the left here shows our average days for licensure. We want to be closer to an average of 180 days from the time of application to licensure. This chart actually breaks down of the 538 homes, how many days it took to, what was the kind of the range of days that it took to license these homes. 53 of them were licensed within 90 days. 172 were right where we wanted them to be, licensed between the 91 days and 180 days. But then we have 126 homes that it took 181 to 270 days, and then 165 homes that it took 271 days or more to license. What gives us hope about hopefully coming closer to achieving our goal this year is the number of enrollments that we have statewide. We have 1,013 homes that are currently enrolled to become licensed. Some of the concerns include this last column here that shows that 377 of those homes have been enrolled for more than a year. More than likely, many of these homes are no longer working with our agencies to become licensed. Please be aware that if families do discontinue the licensing process, just because they stop does not mean that their enrollment has been closed. So what you'll have to do is, in addition to maybe closing the family out in my SAC list, you'll also want to withdraw their application by submitting the 3706 to DCWL, and make sure that you include an explanation of why the family or the home is no longer working with the agency toward becoming licensed. That is what would need to be done for homes that are no longer progressing to move some of these homes off of the dashboard and have a clearer picture of the homes that we are still working with, those that are still working toward licensure. All right, at the bottom of the screen here, this shows placement, residential placement of children by age group. And let's see, it breaks it down by children who are 18 and over, those between 13 and 17, and those who are 0 to 12, and how those numbers compare to the overall groups of children in care by age. Finally, this chart on the right here shows children placed with relatives. And we also see the total number of children in foster care, which is listed at 10,308 right now. I'm believing there may be an error somewhere here because it shows 0 children placed in parental homes, and I'm sure there probably are some, but that total number of children in care, 10,308, is accurate. And we see that there are 4,311 who are placed with their relatives. If you kind of want a more detailed look at the homes that have been licensed, we are going to take a look at that information on the second screen of the dashboard. But before we go there, I do want to point out this middle section of additional reports. I mentioned that this percent of fiscal year completed kind of shows you where we are in the fiscal year, but it does not match up completely with our interim goals. We do have quarterly interim progress goals. For instance, at the end of this month, we should have reached 70% of our goals toward licensure, but you can see kind of where we are by clicking this interim progress. And so you see that we have licensed 538 homes, and the goal by the end of this quarter is going to be to have 676 homes licensed. All right, this current active foster home button here just shows the number of foster homes that we have. That number, that 4,961, is not just unrelated homes. Most of the information in the dashboard just gives you information about unrelated foster homes, but this number is the total number, including relatives. So just be aware of that. Goal details will tell you by agency what the commitments are toward licensing homes. So you'll see in this first column what the commitment is. And then if you look at the other columns, it tells you kind of how the agency has progressed toward meeting those goals. So as you see for this, this first agency, court agency, we see that that no homes have been licensed so far. The goal that they had to license for teen homes is 1. The goal for teen homes license is 0 because they don't have any homes licensed so far. But anyway, you can see how the goal breaks down by looking at this goal detail. And then we have closure details here as well. And that shows of the homes that we have closed, what are the populations of children that these homes closed for? This gives us a good idea of how we should target our recruitment in terms of replacing some of these service categories and making sure that we are reaching out to parents who can meet the needs and cover some of those needs that are no longer available to us because the home's closed. All right, any of those different screens and reports are, you can print them out. I should have pointed that out when I had it open, but you would just hit print here and it will either generate the screen or sometimes an Excel spreadsheet that shows information. Now moving on to the licensure detail screen here. Because I'm at a statewide view right now, this is just going to show all of the information about homes that have been licensed. And so this first column, this first chart is going to show you all of the homes that have been licensed so far. This can be narrowed down by BSC, agency, or county. This second chart here shows related homes that changed and are now accepting unrelated placements. Counties and agencies do get credit toward reaching their annual goals when relative homes do change to accepting unrelated placements. Now, a common question that we receive is about existing foster homes that might change their licenses to say care for teens. Are those homes able to count toward the annual licensing goal? And unfortunately, the answer is no. The reason that we're not able to count those homes is because those are existing homes that we have already been utilizing as resources. And the licensing dashboard is only really tracking new homes that are available to us. You may say, well, now this is an additional resource that we're able to use for teens. But if we were to count every time an existing foster home changed their services to accommodate different services and different types of care, we would also have to look at homes that have closed and the services that are no longer being provided to us. And we don't want to do that, especially right now, because we are closing many more homes than we're opening. And so if we were to look at all those different service categories that are no longer met, we would be looking at negative progress toward meeting our goals. We can change these relative families that are now accepting unrelated care because these were not resources that we were able to use in the past when it came to meeting the needs of children who are entering care and outside of relatives. And so now this becomes a resource for placing unrelated children who come into care and need a foster home. I am hoping that makes sense. Does anyone have any questions about what I just explained before we continue to move on? All right, let's continue. The third chart here just shows enrolled foster homes. As you see, it also lists the date of enrollment. If you were to scroll through all of the homes that have been enrolled, we are seeing many homes that may have been enrolled in 2020, 2021, some 2018, 2019, as you see. And so if some of these families are no longer working with your agency toward licensure, please initiate the process to withdraw their application. All right, and finally, this bottom chart details all of the homes that have closed. You see on the side in many of these charts, these numbers, these ones and zeros. This just gives us information about the services. In this chart, because we're talking about closed foster homes, this gives us an idea of the services that were provided for whether these were adolescent homes, whether these were sibling homes, and whether they cared for children with disabilities. If you see ones, that means yes, they did provide that service. If you see zeros, that means no, they did not provide that particular service. That information exists for these top two charts as well, for non-relative foster homes and for relatives who have changed to accepting unrelated children. All right.
Monica,
Yes.
there is a question. The question is, what about transfers? Does it count those?
Transfers are existing foster homes, so they will not count.
They will not count. Okay.
No. Okay. And then I think another question that we get is, will homes that were previously licensed and closed their license and then decided to reopen, whether they're going to count toward licensing goals? And it all depends on the time frame. If they were closed for less than a year and then reopen, they will not count. If they were closed for more than a year, they will count toward meeting the county's licensing goals. I frequently receive emails about homes that have been licensed and are not showing up on the dashboard. There's a couple things to look out for when you are trying to identify whether, your homes and whether they've shown up on the dashboard. One is be aware of that when the dashboard comes out, it's usually for the previous month. So say you have a home that was just licensed in say June 1st, and the dashboard is sent to you. As you all know, this dashboard that you're seeing right now hasn't been sent, and so you may not receive it until June 20th, and you don't see your home. Well, don't panic, because keep in mind that the dashboard that you received is for May. It'll cover all homes through May, and so remember, there's usually always going to be a slight delay in the information that you're seeing and what you may be expecting to see on the dashboard. So just be aware of the date that the family was licensed and the date that the month that the dashboard is covering. Another common concern is that a relative family that changed to unrelated care is not showing up on the dashboard. The most frequent concern, the most frequent issue that I see is about how the 3706 was sent in to try to change the family from related care only to unrelated care. The most frequent issue that is preventing these homes from showing up is that the wrong service code is listed on the 3706. Most people will put general care and believe that will allow families to show up on the dashboard. What general care means is basically that the family just provides normal age-appropriate care to children. So that can apply to related families as well as unrelated families. That is not the service code that you'll need to list to make sure that these relative families show up on the dashboard. What you need to make sure that you have listed as a service code is unrelated caregiver. Okay, so make sure that when you're sending in these 3706 to change relative foster homes, include the unrelated caregiver service code. All right, any other questions about the dashboard?
So there's a question that says, let's see. If a reopen does not count, does it come off the closed home list? Does it come off that number?
Okay, I'm trying to understand the question.
If a home reopening doesn't count because it's reopening within the 12 months, does it come off the closed home list? I would assume it would. Right? If the home reopens within 12 months?
I am thinking.
It might not actually come out of the real hard data because we have to know which homes closed when.
Well, I'm thinking that it will not drop off. I have never seen anything, any data be changed retroactively to reflect future changes. I mean, if there's an error, at times we can contact the data management unit to update information or look into a concern, but there is no process for changes like that to happen automatically.
Okay, now I've got another one.
Okay.
Where can we find the list of service codes to utilize?
The list of service codes should be on the 3706, but I'm thinking what? So those are not paper copies anymore, right? Or are they? It should be
They
included.
send them, they do send the paper copies,
Okay,
and it's on the
Okay.
back. But I mean, it takes some time to actually get one,
okay,
but it's still like, the two pieces at the same time, and it's on the back.
okay. Yeah, that is where you'll find it.
I bet that's also something we can figure out and maybe send out in an email or post with the recording of this session. Right? We can answer that question. There's another
Yeah.
question here.
Okay.
Let's see. I understand that transfers don't count, but I'm taking all I can get to replace closed homes. Will that help with the estimator worksheet?
It actually should help because the number of homes available to your county has still increased. So, but I think it's really going to depend on the time that the data pull occurred. Has the home already reopened? Have they not? Because remember, it's a snapshot in time when the data is pulled. And so it all is going to depend on whether that change has already taken place or not.
Okay. And then we did get someone provided us with a PDF of the 3706. So I've downloaded that and I'll include that as an attachment. And I'll also make sure it gets put up with the recording for anyone else that comes back to watch this training in the future.
Right, thank
so
you.
Looks like we've done all of those things. Thank you so much for providing that document. You saved me like 47 seconds of Googling. So that's awesome.
All right, so if there are no other questions about the dashboard, we will go ahead and move on. Let me locate my screen again here. All right, we're back. All right, so after gathering information, collaborating with partners and sharing information, you're ready to begin completing the 878, which is the Adoptive and Foster Parent Recruitment and Retention Plan. Let's talk a little bit about the plan before we take a look at the format. MDHHS has the responsibility of completing and submitting the plan, but it also involves a lot of coordination with private agency partners in the county. The ISEP does require that the AFPRR plan is completed annually, and the monitors do review the documents. We have had to submit every single plan to them for them to review. So, at times, at different times they may have requested only a handful. The last few years, they've requested all of the documents. So just know that this is something that we definitely have to take seriously. It is reviewed. The main purpose of the plan, though, is to make sure that children in foster care have enough homes. And completed plans will be due this year on August 9th. From the counties to the BSCs. As I mentioned, it is MDHHS's responsibility to fill out the AFPRR plan, also known as the 878, each year. But in addition to coordinating with private agencies, we encourage you all to coordinate with partnering groups and organizations, any foster parents that may be involved in helping with recruitment or retention activities, any MYOI youth who are also involved, and also the regional resource teams. A few things to note. The forms are revised every year, so you will want to make sure that you are taking note of the revision date before completing the plan, because all previous versions will not be accepted. Usually from year to year, there are some changes with the plans. And so if you're using a previous year's plan, there are certain things that you may not be aware of, questions that may not be answered because the wrong form is being used. You will want to make sure that you're including all participants in the plan, including those agencies, community partners, MYOI youth, foster parents, the regional resource team. The plan should not be a replication of the previous year's plan with no changes whatsoever. This is an opportunity to get creative and to expand the number of people that you're coming into contact with. and to develop new ideas and partnerships to help recruit within specific groups for your target populations. As I mentioned earlier, this is a living document. As your agency sees fit, you can adjust certain things. Obviously, we don't want you to do a complete overhaul of your plan. You did put the plan into place for a reason, with certain activities and events and training in place for a reason. But if it, the nature of foster care is that you have to adapt. And so if there are certain parts of the things that you have planned that you believe that needs to change, that is absolutely allowed and encouraged if it is going to benefit your agency and your county.
So Monica, that goes back to one of the earliest questions where we talked about pre-planning, training topics and that kind of thing. If there is an opportunity to have that comes about to have a special speaker or something like that and change those training topics, that's all doable because this is a living document, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So on this page, you may notice that the phone number column has been eliminated to allow more space to complete other fields. Also, another change I want to note is that in the past, additional rows could be added to the form as needed. This year's form revision increased compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act, so the addition of roles is no longer possible. On this first page, what you can do, because some agencies, some counties actually have a lot of participants that, that may exceed the number of roles we have here. So if you press enter, if you're within a row, if you press enter, it will go to a different line on the page without going to a different row. So if you find that there are not enough rows to list all of the participants in your county, please add participants from the same agency within the same row, but make sure there's only one participant's name on each line. So basically, if you press enter or return, go to a new line to put a new name. And then once you are going to a different agency, go ahead and tap to a different row. I'm hoping that makes sense, but please, add a comment in the chat if that needs to be explained further.
It sounds like, Monica, what you're describing is those fields are set for like text wrapping. So more than one name can end up in that box, just as long as they stay within that column, correct?
As long as they stay on
that same agency row.
Right.
And press enter within the box.
Right. So while you can't add rows, you can expand each row to include more than one name. The only thing I'm asking is just so the information doesn't get jumbled. Like, don't put more than one person's name on a line, because then you would need to kind of put their email address to match it, and usually there's not enough space. So then the information doesn't line up.
Okay.
And so if we could just make sure that there's only one participant per line, but you can increase the size of each row, just not add additional rows. All right.
Monica, I have a question. It's Felicia.
Okay.
So the counties like Wayne, who have a lot of agencies in Oakland and Macomb, last year, since you can't add rows, they've just been doing the extra, and they can still do that, the extra sheet of paper.
That is fine for Wayne. Wayne is in a unique situation because of the number of participants. So that's definitely fine for Wayne.
Well, in Oakland, I think Oakland and Macomb also use that.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
No problem. All right. So let's see. We'll talk about other ways that we have determined to address this change with not being able to add additional roles as we continue to go through the 878. All right, on this second page of the AFPRR forms, sections A, B, and C reference the information that should be used while you're completing the 878. That includes the foster home estimator, your county and agencies tracked data, and the foster home licensing dashboard. These are all things that you want to kind of make sure that you gather as you're completing the 878. For section D, determining your county's target populations. should be based on the data that was just mentioned, as well as looking at issues that you might be having with finding placements. If your county has struggled to find placements for children with severe medical needs or large sibling groups, if you've had those struggles within the last year, then those would be your target populations. Those are going to be your targets for finding homes. Section E asks about foster home closures in your county. As noted in the instructions, you're going to want to look at the last dashboard for fiscal year 21, which is the September 2021 dashboard for the number of homes that closed in your county. To document the reasons for closure, I'm hoping that your agencies have been tracking these reasons as you are submitting your 3706s to close homes, but you can also refer to data collected by the agencies in your county, along with the foster home survey information that's received from closed homes. Obviously, I think I mentioned yesterday that we had over 1,000 homes that 1,600 or so homes that closed, but about 500 something people that submitted the foster home closure. So every single county, every single agency won't have respondents for every home that closed, but this is still a good resource for looking at the reasons for closure if this is not information that has been tracked closely by your agencies. All right, page 3, the question at the top of the page asks you to evaluate what you can do to decrease the number of closures that your county is experiencing. This is especially important if your county is closing more homes than you are opening. Please keep in mind that we are only looking at unrelated foster homes when you are answering that question. Licensed relatives who do not provide unrelated care should be excluded in considering the number of closures in your county. Only licensed related homes that also provide unrelated care, and then non-relative foster homes should be included in this number. In addition, we're only looking at voluntary closures. So homes that were closed administratively or due to revocation should not be included in the numbers here either. Next, we will focus on documenting how inquirers move through the licensing process. You should be able to just transfer this information from the assumptions worksheet. Again, we're talking about non-relative families only. Families should be counted as one inquiry. For example, if there's more than one inquirer or applicant in a home, they should still only be counted as one inquiry, not two. Since we're looking at potential number of foster homes, not individual applicants, we want to count inquirers by family. Information for all agencies in the county should be combined and documented here. For this section, we're looking at current year data from the beginning of the fiscal year in October and through the end of June. The average number of days to complete licensure can be found by selecting your county on the latest dashboard and looking for the average days to licensure toward the bottom of the main screen. I pointed that out when we were looking at the dashboard. After filling in the chart in section F, you'll want to document the primary reasons why potential foster parents dropped out of the licensing process and the efforts that the county is going to make to move families through the process. A great approach would be to look at the stages where the highest percentage of families are lost, because you have that information about how families move through the process, and then really look at your agency's processes during these stages and figure out how you can strengthen engagement with families during those stages. There are 2 new areas to address on the form this year. On this page, the first is related to the average days to licensure. Statewide, as you saw on the dashboard, our average is 243 days. And this exceeds that expected time frame by more than 2 months. Because we know that families are more likely to drop out of the licensing process when it is extended for lengthy periods of time, we're asking counties to identify their efforts to reduce that time to licensure. when the average exceeds 210 days. So we did give some grace, although the expected time frame is 180 days. Really, if you are exceeding 210, there's some, it's not an isolated situation. These are really processes that your agency and your county may want to look at and figure out ways to reduce that time frame. This is actually a question that was commonly asked during the review of the plans, and asking counties and agencies to really look at ways to reduce that time frame. So now the question is just being asked up front instead of during the review process. The last question in this section is really just a restructured question rather than a new one. It's asking about efforts to move families through the licensing process, but reasons related to reducing the time frame to licensure don't need to be repeated here. So that's why the question has been restructured, because it's asking like what other efforts outside of whatever you have just listed about reducing the time frame, what are other ways that your county can move interested families through the licensing process. And then at the bottom of the page for section G, you will reference the assumptions worksheet to help you fill out the county percentages and the county assumptions for relative usage and for residential usage. We can take a look back at the assumptions worksheet just to refresh our memories and just so you can see where this information is coming from and how it should be entered into the 878.
Hey, Monica.
Yes.
There's a question here. It says the families that began or completing pre-licensing training, is this specifically referring to GROW?
It is mainly referring to GROW, but we do know that, say for instance, Kent County uses Presley Ridge of GROW. So we have, just said pre-licensure training just to make sure that we're being inclusive of all different types of pre-licensure training.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so what you see on the screen now is the assumptions worksheet that was completed for Michigan County. Near the top of the page, we can find the current county percentages and the county assumptions for children placed with relatives. I'm showing you that information highlighted now. We're gonna wanna transfer the percentages directly from the assumptions worksheet to the 878. Even if there have been some changes in placement percentages from the time that the assumptions worksheet was completed to the time that the 878 is completed, it's important not to alter this information. Just make sure that you are keeping the numbers that are on the assumptions worksheet and changing them and being consistent in putting those same numbers into the 878. Keeping that original information helps us to really maintain consistency across counties and validity of the data that's being used because those numbers are used in the calculations. And so we want to make sure that it's not being changed. All right, below the relative usage information on the assumptions worksheet, we'll find that the current county percentages and the county assumptions for residential care, that is at the top of page 4, so it's not showing, but it's kind of the same process. You'll just want to transfer the numbers directly from the assumptions worksheet to the residential usage chart. Let's go ahead and go over to page 4. Now you'll see the residential usage place where you'll take those numbers and put it from the assumptions worksheet right onto the 878. Please note that your county is going to need to explain the assumed percentages that were chosen. For example, 27% of youth over 12 are placed in residential care in Michigan County. That's what we showed on in the assumptions worksheet. Michigan County assumes that 20% of youth over 12 will be placed in residential care during the next fiscal year. Michigan County was considered of that maximum, and so set that percentage at 20%. While we know that the maximum percentage of for youth in over 12 in residential care is 20%, that is not an explanation that you should put on the form on the 878. Instead, you'll need to explain that you're using targeted recruitment strategies and seeking services within the community to reduce current reliance on residential usage, or any of the other efforts that your county is going to be implementing, not just adding an explanation that that's the maximum, and that's why you chose that number. Now you'll have to actually be thoughtful and think about the different ways that you'll reduce the percentage, and that's what should be explained.
Monica, is there an
Yes.
anticipated date for when the assumption worksheets will be available?
I do not have that date on me right now, but it is on the memo that was shared with the counties and the agencies. So all of the dates and deadlines are on that memo.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. All right, let's see. Okay, in section 3, recruitment plan, we are now asking every agency to list their CPA number. This is needed to accurately assign the goals for agencies participating in the plan. Oftentimes in the past, there's been some confusion when assigning goals to an agency that has multiple branches and locations. So not knowing, which CPA to assign the goal to. To begin completing the recruitment plan section, you'll want to, okay, so let me just make sure I let you know with that, that is a really important area to make sure that you are filling out. So we are not having to follow up later or guess the agency location for those agencies that have multiple locations because it is about assigning the goal. So we want to make sure that we're doing that accurately. All right, so once you have entered and listed all of the agencies that are involved and you're ready to begin completing the recruitment plan section, you'll want to have your county's foster home estimator handy. The estimator will not provide goals for those last 4 columns on the screen. And that includes 1, 2, 3. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's not going to include a goal for homes for children with disabilities or treatment foster homes, TPP homes, or homes for ICWA or MIFA placement. But that doesn't mean that that doesn't have to be discussed. It's, we won't have an estimated goal, but the expectation is that agencies consider what your placement needs in the county are to determine those goals. Let's look back at the estimator for a bit of a refresher on where to look for the goals for your county. All right, so this section, the left side of the screen is coming from the estimator, and the little portion of the page at the bottom of the screen on the right is what you would see in on the 878. This section has been taken from page 3 of the estimator. As I mentioned before, line 25A shows the county's licensing goals that should be entered onto the 878 form. The first column shows the total goal for the county. The second one shows the number of homes needed for children ages 0 to 12. And the last column shows the number of homes needed for youth 13 to 17. The number of homes needed for siblings can be found at the bottom of the page. In the on line 38, line 38. And these are the numbers that should be entered on the foster home estimator goals line at the bottom of the recruitment plan chart in the AFPRR plan. And so you'll just take those numbers directly and place them in the 878. The exception to just transferring the numbers directly over is if any of those goals, estimated goals for children 0 to 12, children over 12, or sibling groups, if any of those goals are higher than the total goal, you will have to increase the total goal to cover that number, whatever that highest number is. So for instance, if the estimator indicates that 15 homes are needed for children that are 0 to 12, then that total goal, even though it shows 14, when you enter the numbers onto the 878, you'll want to put 15 in place of 14 for the total goal, because you can't license 15 homes for siblings and not have at least 15 total homes. That makes sense to everyone? All right, I am assuming if there are questions about it, that they'll be entered into the chat. For now, let's go ahead. Move on. All right, after the estimator goals are entered, at the bottom of the chart, each agency licensing homes and the agencies licensing the homes have already been listed, along with their, then each agency is going to want to identify their portion of the goal. All of the goals have to be equal to or higher than the estimator goal, but not lower. And so whatever the estimator goals are, you'll want to make sure that the final goals that your county comes up with have to, at the very least, meet those estimated number of homes that should be licensed. When we look at each row going across, so say an agency is listed and you're looking at the numbers going across, the numbers for those special population homes do not have to add up. They don't have to be equal to the total number of homes licensed in the first column. If my agency's total goal is to license 10 homes, then my agency might commit to licensing as few as 0 homes or as many as 10 homes for each of the special population categories. I might only license 2 homes for teens. I might license 7 homes for 0 to 12, and then I might license 7 homes for sibling groups. If you add that 7, 7, and 2 up, that's 16, which is more than that 10. So just know that you're not trying to make the numbers add up, because some homes actually might, cover multiple different special populations, and so it doesn't need to add up to that total number. All right, so when we add the special population categories together, the sum does have to cover the total number of homes that are listed. So as you are adding the numbers going down the columns, those numbers do need to add up because you are directly adding the numbers in the column. And so if you have 5 agencies participating in say licensing homes for teens, and the goal for teen homes is 10, then each of those agencies have to, all of the agencies that commit to licensing homes for teens have to add up to 10 or more. Let's see, there's no way that, let's see. Okay, so I'm hoping that I'm explaining that okay. The numbers going from left to right don't have to add up, but as you add going top to bottom, they do need to add up. I guess that's probably the simplest way of explaining it. All right, this is the 4th year that the Michigan monitoring team has requested that we set interim goals and document our quarterly progress toward meeting our licensing goals. Once information is added in that first column of the chart for the interim goals, the interim percentages are going to calculate automatically. The only thing you'll need to do is when you are determining what your interim goals are, is to round those percentages to the nearest whole number, because it does calculate to the 10th, but obviously we can't license homes to the 10th. So you just need to round up or down to the nearest whole number. Section C shows the beginning of the next section, non-relative recruitment requirements. This is where information about recruitment events and activities should be documented. The role of the regional resource team in the county's recruitment activities should be summarized in this section. Many counties are already partnering with the RRTs to achieve recruitment, licensing, and retention goals. And so we encourage your county to include your RRT during the AFPRR planning process. Their role is really to take the lead as experts in identifying, planning, and facilitating recruitment activities. So that is a resource that you should use to your benefit. We've also continued to ask questions here on page 6 that are intended for counties to place more focus on targeted recruitment of homes for children that have significant placement needs. With targeted recruitment in mind, because we're facing such challenges with placing sibling groups together and placing teens in foster homes, there is a new requirement for each county to include a minimum of 2 targeted recruitment events for sibling groups and a minimum of 2 targeted recruitment events for teens during the fiscal year. The regional resource teams can be involved in helping, kind of giving guidance, helping to plan these events or activities, but these events should not be initiated and planned solely by the RRTs when it comes to meeting that requirement. They are already planning and facilitating certain targeted recruitment events, and we really just don't want multiple counties listing that one activity or event, since the goal is to increase recruitment of teen and sibling homes. All right, so some tips for this section, as you see on the screen, make sure you have events that are geared toward the target population that you identified on page 2. Please avoid using acronyms unless you have spelled them out first. You know, this shouldn't be a cut and paste from your document last year. If you keep doing the same events, you'll never really add anything new. You can't really expect to reach new people and improve your results. Ask your regional resource team for assistance with developing those target events. And, you know, be open to trying new things and improving your chances for better results. All right, so we are moving on to page 7. The AFPRR form, I'm sure you all have noticed, is longer this year. And it's mainly just because of the layout to reach to meet the ADA requirements. So you'll notice here is one place where the chart has been changed. Check boxes have been added, but that actually works to your benefit because it reduces the amount of typing that needs to be done. It doesn't show it in its entirety here, but at the bottom of the last page, it does show what the acronyms stand for. The first column is just asking for information about who's participating in your events. Those acronyms are explained, whether it's an adoptive or foster parent, a youth in foster care, et cetera. And then the second column are all of the different abbreviations or acronyms for any targeted recruitment events that you're having. So for each event, we want you to identify who the target is. If you have identified that the event is going to target homes for adolescents and homes for disabilities and you know, treatment foster homes, then it's really not a targeted event, and you'll just want to check GC for general care. Ideally here, only one box will be checked. We want you to identify the target, the primary target population for each event or activities. See, during the recruitment training, we talked about the value of layering messages and being a consistent presence in the community. So we have added months to this chart to encourage thoughtful planning for events and activities to occur throughout the year. Unfortunately, additional roles can't be added to this chart, but we will discuss how this can be addressed shortly. Completing the chart is relatively self-explanatory. Most of the information requested is meant to encourage agencies in the county to be strategic and intentional about the events and the activities that are planned. Agencies in the county should provide information about the planned recruitment and events and activities here, who's going to be participating, the types of homes that the agency hopes to gain as a result of the event or activity. And as I mentioned, identify just the primary target population rather than multiple targets. Agencies should also consider whether repeat events were beneficial the last time they were held, and any strategies that might need to change in an attempt to improve the outcome next time. So that is the reason for the new or repeat box, because it's a good way to see what new things that your agency is trying. And if something is being repeated, has it been successful for you in the past? Or is it something that you might want to reconsider and maybe replace it with a different strategy? All right, the training section is also fairly self-explanatory. Here you're asked to document all of the trainings the county is planning to host, provide or facilitate throughout the year. If you're struggling to figure out what types of trainings that should be offered, just go to the source, go to your foster parents and ask them what they would like to have more training about. It's a good idea to survey your foster parents and ask them what they need. Anyway, of course, you know, there are annual requirements that the agency should be offering annually, but as things come up, you may notice certain patterns of concerns that foster parents are having. And so it's a good idea to implement those different types of training, but also, as I mentioned, to ask them about their needs and look for opportunities to include them. All right, many of us are looking forward to being able to gather again in person. But in addition to looking at our plans for retention to include big events like zoo days or appreciation banquets, when you are completing the retention plan section of the AFPRR form, make sure that you're also including smaller things. You know, remember to think outside the box and include ways that you support families and your practices of communications, responsiveness and development. So if you institute kind of a common practice of making sure you return phone calls within 24 hours or 48 hours, document that there, because it is really one way that you are supporting foster parents and showing your agency's commitment to making sure they know that they're valued and they're supported. You know, think of ways that you can, you know, also address some of those things that we've heard from foster parents in terms of what they need for support. You know, think about if your parents just had a really tough placement. You might want to create a habit of mailing a thank you card or a thinking of you card for situations like that. Make sure that licensing workers reach out to foster parents after they take a child to see if they need anything. You know, as we talked about before, those times of transition are often the most difficult times for families. And so knowing that, institute a plan to make sure that you are checking in with families and providing that support to them. In this section of the plan, you know, just in, like I said before, just in addition to those big things, just think about those little things that make really big statements about how your county and how your agencies are committed to providing support. So in wrapping up the plan, each of the agency directors or their designees should sign the document. This is another place where additional rows can't be added, but again, if you press enter or return, it will take you to the next line, and another name could be added on an extra line without adding additional rows. All right, because the number of rows were limited in the charts on the 878, we created a supplemental form to document activities, events, and trainings that don't fit on the 878. In addition to MDHHS using this form to document all of that additional information, we would like private agencies to use this form. Several parts of the 878 are not completed by private agencies, and this shortened supplemental form covers the information that private agencies tend to provide to the counties that they're working with. These supplemental forms should be submitted with the 878 to provide a complete picture of the county's activities. Questions such as the number of inquiries and strategies to move families through the licensing process have not been included on this form. The expectation is that these topics are discussed during those collaborative meetings with the county, and then countywide information and strategies are developed and documented on the main 878, rather than indicating several agency-specific approaches. So rather than us having information about how each individual agency is going to be implementing efforts to, say, move families through the licensing process, in those collaborative meetings, come up with a countywide approach and then document that. All right. All of those great events and activities that you listed in the plan are certainly going to cost money. Some are going to be more expensive than others, and most of them are going to incur some type of cost. Of course, we know there are free activities, but everything can't be completely free. So let's talk about your budget. MDHHS receives an AFPRR budget allocation each year. Private agencies will have to find out what their recruitment and retention budgets are. MDHHS agencies complete this budget spreadsheet with events and activities and whatever their associated costs are, and then submit the budget along with the AFPRR plans. Private agencies are not required to turn this in. They're not required to turn in budgets, but this is a tool that can be used for tracking if your agency doesn't require the use of a different tool for your retention and your recruitment and retention budgets. I do want to point out and remind you all that the final budget allocations are not released until October 1st. And so county AFPRR budgets really are tentative plans until then. Planning a budget before the allocations are approved, though, does provide the opportunity to estimate spending and to ensure that the expenses are allowable. We plan to distribute the allowable expenditures document before the final plans are due. I don't anticipate there'll be any significant changes to the allowable expenditures this year. If there are some things that you tend to think of, though, and you would like to see addressed in the allowable expenditures document, feel free to email me and we can make sure that we're including that information. MDHHS should use the current year's allocation amount to estimate budgets for fiscal year 23. Ultimately, though, the BSC does control the recruitment and retention budget for MDHHS agencies. Jessica and I are here to provide guidance regarding whether certain expenses are allowable. And of course, private agencies would need to verify any allowed expenses using protocols within your agencies. The budget spreadsheets, once completed, should be sent to your BSC analysts when the completed AFPRR forms are submitted. And as you all know, this is the last document that is needed during the AFPRR planning process. So we are pretty close to the end. I do want to take a moment to acknowledge any questions that may have come up that we haven't already addressed.
Monica, this is Felicia again. I don't have a question. I have a statement for my counties, Big Five. I've told them in the email I sent them that the due dates that were sent with Lansing from on the memo or the CI, I can't remember. Those are due dates that I have to provide to Lansing. So I've let them know. I want to remind them that you will get dates prior to those dates that are on that memo. Just as a reminder, don't be alarmed that I thought I had a few more days. I always ask for them before so I can review them before I send them up. So just a reminder.
Felicia, we did try to account for that this year because in the past that was always a concern. And so we did try to put those additional dates into the memo this time. But,
okay.
But if you do find that there is still additional time that's needed, I guess just make sure the counties have enough notice to know what those dates are.
Gotcha. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you. Anything else?
There are no other questions in the chat.
Okay, so as you all begin to execute your plans, I created a little acronym here. I want to encourage you to evaluate your approach. During the process, expect changes, eliminate barriers, and think about ways to eliminate barriers while working with potential and existing caregivers. Collaborate to strengthen your teams. Utilize your partners. Team with foster and adoptive parents, and as much as you possibly can, enjoy the process. I fully expect that there may be questions along the way as you guys continue to engage in the planning process. I'm definitely happy to assist. I think that is all that we have to present for today.